Stop Donald Trump's use of non-disclosure agreements. Washington Post columnist Ruth Marcus says she has obtained a draft of the non-disclosure agreement signed by senior staffers of the Trump White House, and that they're supposed to last beyond his presidency. Ruth writes, quote, in the early months of the administration, at the behest of now President Trump, who was furious over leaks from within the White House, senior White House staff members were asked to and did sign non-disclosure agreements, vowing not to reveal confidential information and exposing them to damages for any violations. Some balked at first, but pressed by then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus and the White House Counsel's office, ultimately complied, concluding that the agreements would likely not be enforceable in any event. The column goes on to say that violators would be on the line for $10 million payable to the federal government for each and any revelation of confidential information. Joining us now, former U.S. Attorney and former aide to Robert Mueller, now an NBC News law enforcement analyst, Chuck Rosenberg, and former GOP counsel for the House Oversight Committee, now a contributor to NBCNews.com's editorial page, Think, Sophia Nelson. Good to have you both.
Good to be.
Chuck, first of all, these NDAs, how could they be, given that somebody works at the White House, how could they be enforced?
It's hard to imagine. First of all, you can contract away many of your rights, willingly and for consideration. And White House staffers already have an obligation not to disclose certain information, confidential information, classified information, privileged information. But the rest of this stuff seems at least odd, and making the federal government the recipient of money if there's a violation also strikes me as odd. But I'd have to see the agreement make it.
Okay, so Sophia, here's a tweet from Michael Hayden. What went through the minds of those who agreed to sign? Did anyone ask, is this normal? Did they think about what they were giving up for themselves and the principles of good governance precedent set? I mean, seriously, you work at the pleasure of the president for the country, correct? Who would sign these and why?
Two things come to mind. First and foremost, we need to remember that when you work at the White House, particularly in the executive office of the president, you have a security clearance. That holds you to keep information confidential. That is what we use to vet people to make sure they're trustworthy. So you don't need a non-disclosure agreement. The second thought I have, Mika, is that doesn't this sound a little bit familiar, like somebody else we know that was given a non-disclosure agreement? And it sounds like President Trump, I'm talking about Stormy Daniels.
Yeah.
It sounds like President Trump has a pattern and practice here of enforcing and asking people to sign these agreements and then threatening them with large liquidated damages clauses,
Yeah.
you and I know, which I've never seen liquidated damages, by the way, at $20 million for $130,000 or ever in the case of a government employee. It's bizarre, and I don't think it's legal.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We're going to get to the bigger questions about the potential firing and what the ramifications would be of Bob Mueller in just a moment. But Josh Earnest, you worked in the White House. Would you sign this?
I can't imagine anybody even asking me to sign it. The thing about it, Mika, is obviously there, on a daily basis you have people who, when you're working in the White House and in the West Wing, you're coming across confidential, sensitive, whether it's market-sensitive information, sometimes it's politically sensitive information, sometimes it is diplomatically sensitive information, and that's not even the information that's necessarily classified. So the other thing that this sort of raises is, was it only senior officials who had to sign this, or did everybody who worked in the West Wing have to sign this? Because the truth is, that's why everybody who works in the West Wing is so carefully vetted, is because there is so much sensitive information readily available. It's striking that they actually thought that something like this would even work, let alone that somebody might even sign it.
It's definitely striking. Chuck, I want to now go to the big picture of the Mueller investigation. It appears the president's getting a little antsy. First of all, does this story, these NDAs, would they be of interest to Mueller for any reason?
Possibly, if people are being asked to withhold information from his investigators, perhaps, but it seems to be of a different sort.
Right. Okay, so bigger picture, there are some who are very concerned that the president will fire Robert Mueller. Are you concerned about that, given the president's patterns? And do you think we're on the verge of a constitutional crisis?
So, first of all, I am concerned that anybody would do anything to interfere with a legitimate federal investigation, including the firing of Robert Mueller. But if that were to happen, Mika, there's still a body of facts. There's still investigators and prosecutors working this case. And my assumption, although those are becoming dangerous these days, is that someone else would pick it up. It would trouble me greatly, but I imagine that the investigation would live on.
And I think this is a good time to remind people that there are some barriers in the way of doing that, right? Because the president can't just out and out fire Mueller. He'd have to get Rosenstein to do it. Have we seen any indication that Rosenstein would be willing to do that, and who would take his place? Because this would be a process.
And it would have to be for cause, as is clear in the charter that established the special counsel. And Rosenstein has said over and over again, and I think properly so, he sees no cause. Mueller's doing what he was asked to do.
So everybody keeps talking about this red line that he shouldn't cross with Mueller. I think he crossed the red line a long time ago. I'm talking about the President of the United States. These tweets about McCabe, the tweets about the Russian investigation, calling it fake news, attacking individuals. We're already, in my opinion, having just written a book about the Constitution, I think we're dangerously close to this already. I think the President is doing something that no CEO of a Fortune 100 could do. Could you imagine the CEO of Xerox getting on and tweeting about one of his senior VPs and saying, 90 days to go until his retirement, ha ha ha, and then the guy gets fired? They'd throw him out of the company. We've crossed the red line a long time ago.
And Mike Barnicle, this weekend, the president, in his tweets, which you have to take his tweets seriously because he fires people by tweet. News happens. Major international foreign policy news happens by tweet in this presidency. He mentioned Mueller by name in his tweets when he lashed out this weekend.
Yes, he did, Mika, and the reality is, the truth is that the President of the United States would dwarf himself standing next to Robert Mueller, given both their lives and their careers stacked up alongside one another. But, Chuck, let me ask you, every day it seems that damage is done to one institution or the other. Damage is done to the presidency, to the Justice Department, to the State Department. But in particular, the level of vindictiveness and pettiness via tweet written by the President of the United States toward Andy McCabe. What do you think about that?
Well, on a couple of levels, Mike. First, Andy's a friend of mine, and so personally, it's somewhere between dismaying, distressing, and disgusting. But second, as an institutionalist, as a career federal prosecutor, the notion that you would attack the most important institutions of government, whether it's the intelligence professionals, your diplomats, your prosecutors, your agents, is astonishing because you're undermining their work. And as citizens, and we're all citizens, whatever party we may belong to, we need them to succeed. And so the notion that you would be going after people personally and professionally as the commander-in-chief, as our chief executive, is astonishing.
It's a new low. Josh Earnest, I go to you because you tend to very carefully give your I tend to emote a little bit, and I'm really working hard, especially since Joe is off, on keeping kind of a straight line here.
You're going great.
But what the heck is going on in this White House? I mean, we've got a scenario right now where people are leaving in droves. You can't even fit a list on a piece of paper of how many people have left, how many people are part of investigations, and we've got a president acting more like what than a president? Describe to me the state of this White House right now.
Yeah, it's in utter disarray, Mika. And one of the things I think that is striking about this is when you have a situation like this, it's difficult to conceive of. Obviously, we've not seen anything quite like this before. But what we're doing is we're actually relying on these institutions more than ever. At the same time that you have the White House attacking those very institutions. And it is distressing, as Chuck cited, but let me try to put a little sunny optimism here, which is that for the last 15 months, we have seen the President of the United States, the chief executive of the most powerful, influential government and country in the world, attacking the law enforcement institution in this country, the diplomatic institutions in this country, in some ways the military institutions in this country have come under attack, and they have withstood that attack. We're actually seeing the institutions of the United States actually prove to be pretty durable and pretty resilient when you consider the sustained fusillade that they have faced from the President of the United States. The one institution that has not fared very well is actually the United States Congress. And the good news about that is in about 8 months, the American people will have an opportunity to make some changes to that institution that hopefully will result in a co-equal branch of government that will actually start pulling its own weight, actually start fulfilling an important duty that it has to the American people to being a check on this administration and making sure that some of those attacks can now actually be blunted and that we can have a Congress that's willing to stand up for those institutions that are facing such withering attacks right now.
Well, I would agree that we are witnessing the resilience of our democracy, and that's great. But I just wonder where Republicans are right now in terms of showing some courage, not about party, but about right and wrong. Because, Chuck, at this point, we're not talking about whether you're a Democrat or Republican and whose side you're on. Aren't we talking about corruption at the highest level?
We're talking about right and wrong. You said it exactly correctly, Mika. You know, for all the years that I was a federal prosecutor and all the time I spent at the FBI, I never thought of myself as a Republican or a Democrat, just as a citizen and an American. That's the way, and Josh is right, the institutions have withstood the attacks because that's the way institutionalists think. They think as Americans and as citizens. As long as we continue to do that, I actually share his optimism. I think we're going to be okay.
My big concern, Mika, is that the Republicans, though, are standing on the sidelines in a way that I think is going to do damage to the GOP for a generation. If they don't stand up soon, John McCain is, Lindsey Graham is, but you've got to have more than that. And the question to me is why? Why won't they speak up? I think that's what really has me upset. Why are you standing by Paul Ryan? Why are you standing by Mitch McConnell? Why has he not been censured? Do something to show you don't approve of and appreciate the conduct of the president right now. The
conduct which is wrong, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. It is downright wrong.
Absolutely.
You don't lie and you don't defame. Chuck Rosenberg, Sophia Nelson, thank you both. Coming up, President Trump has congratulated the leaders of both Turkey and China in their bids to consolidate power. So, after 18 years in power, will Vladimir Putin's re-election to another 6-year term win him a positive tweet from the president? America's former ambassador to Russia joins us just ahead on Morning Joe.